There we are.
Hello.
Let's add this spotlight. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Mark? Thanks for having me.
Well, first of all, so nice to have you. And in a second, I'm going to give you a proper introduction here and run through the bio. But thank you so much for joining today. Such an exciting topic we're going to have today, folks, talking about the experienced mindset. A book I super enjoyed. And by the way, I also really enjoyed Growth IQ, which was Tiffani's prior book from a couple of years back, both fantastic books. But Tiffani, for the first time ever, maybe I should do this properly. Let's do a proper introduction for you. I'll just take a look at your bio here. Hey, team, there are so many reasons I absolutely love my job. And the next hour is a perfect example of one of them. So getting to chat with folks like Tiffani, when you look through the bio, it's kind of mind-boggling. But today, Tiffani's the Global Customer Growth and Innovation Evangelist at Salesforce. Cool name. I'm the new evangelist at In the Funnel. I'm taking that title. But on a serious note, over the past 2 decades, Tiffani's led large revenue-producing organizations at businesses ranging from startups to Fortune 500. She's been a research fellow at Gartner, where some of her cutting-edge insights helped Microsoft, Cisco, Salesforce, HP, IBM, Oracle, no bigger companies than those. Of course, she is a Wall Street Journal best-selling author of the first book I showcased, Growth IQ, and we had a wonderful chat with Tiffani maybe a year ago about that book. All of our ideas, by the way, have been published in outlets from Harvard Business Review, which we always love on this show, all the way through to Fast Company. And here's the wild one. She's been named a top 50 business thinker in the world twice. So we've had a number of guests from the Thinkers 50 group, number of guests on the show. We're always just so delighted they do it. And Tiffani's been on that list twice, just like a few of our other pals. Folks, she's also the host of the podcast, What's Next with Tiffani Bova. So also fantastic podcast. So that's one to check out. We'll go through all those links. We'll talk about all those things as well at the end of the podcast. But today we're going to do a real deep dive on the experience mindset. That took a lot of effort. But Tiffani, welcome to the show. If you do any more stuff, we can't have you on the show. The bio is too long. We can't get it in.
Thank you for the kind introduction. It's always, there's a lot to the bio. It just depends who the audience is. But I think the part you might have left out is I am a recovering seller. I sold technology for a number of years. And so my heart lies with the selling community.
Oh, well, everybody on the podcast here today is going to love you for that one. And I know you've spoken to him multiple times, but we always love Dan Pink's book, To Sell is Human. We're all in sales. So everybody's selling in some capacity. By the way, there's no apology or bad word with the term selling. It's management consulting these days. But Tiffani, let's jump into the book. And here's one of those things when you read great books, folks. First of all, I got to call it out very tactically. Both your books are so beautifully designed. And so, I literally read hundreds of books for the guests on the show in a given year. And it really does jump out at me the way the book is designed. It's such a friendly read. And that's an important thing because you also have real depth of research. It's a bit of a bibliography for kind of a master class. And because we're going through writing our first book, I'm always checking these things out. It's just a beautiful looking book. But the stat that hits you folks in the first couple of pages, companies with high customer experience and an employee experience exhibit 3-year compound annual growth rates. So their CAGR is almost double that of those with lower customer and employee experiences. So the group with high customer experience and employee experience, 8.5 CAGR, compounded annual growth rate. Those with low, 4.3. So when obviously that's the showcasing stat upon all this data, and the rest of the book sort of starts to explain why. But did you have this point of view beforehand, Tiffani, or was this kind of an epiphany for you when you went through the 2 years of research?
Well, let me start by just going back to the comment about the feel of the book. It is one of the things that I hear most often, like wow, that was such amazing. I hadn't thought about, like, people will literally say, like, I loved the entire feel of the book. It's approachable, it's easy, it's light, if you will. And that I spent a lot of time on that, because being a salesperson, sort of growing up, that we have a short attention span. We want to kind of get to whatever it is we need to get to, right? So we can move on. We don't have a lot of time. And if it's too long-winded and repetitive, you start to lose people. So I was given some amazing advice when I was first writing my first book, Growth IQ, was write the book you would want to read.
Yeah.
And
nice.
so I read a ton of books from Dan Pink and Seth Godin and others, right, that I follow. And I'd say, what did I like? Like, what captured me? What captivated me? What kept me engaged? And I want to do that, right? What lost me a little bit, or what wasn't as approachable, right? So the sketch notes in my book, I'm a visual learner. So I write stories in the book, but I had them sketched so that those people like me that are visual learners could see the story. I underlined, because you may not read the whole page. I won't be offended, but you'll go to what's important. And then at the end of the chapter, I've told you what I've told you, and I've given you some questions. So you might not read the whole chapter. So I've tried to give the multitude of way people enjoy and learn and read access to the book. So thank you, Mark, for saying that, because I worked hard at it. On to the question about the research. Look, for those of you who read Growth IQ, it was 10 paths to growth. And it was really a culmination of being in sales, marketing, and customer service or customer success for almost 15 years, individual quota bearing sales rep, all the way up to running, a division of a Fortune 500 company, right? So I sort of went the gamut, and I was very early in the cloud. Then I spent 10 years at Gartner. So during that time, my area of coverage was sales transformation. Again, my love of sales. And so during the 25 years that was of me being a practitioner and then an academic, I sort of landed in these 10 paths, 60,000 words in that book. The very first path was customer experience. And I was, it's the true north. It's where you have to focus, be customer centric, be customer obsessed, sort of all those statements. And I might have mentioned employee a handful of times in the 60,000 words, maybe 150 words, maybe I'm giving myself probably a little more credit than is actually due. But I would then say to you that it was a miss. So fast forward, I'm working here at Salesforce. I'm standing on stage in Canada at an event. And I said, I didn't think it was a coincidence that Salesforce is a great place to work globally, one of the most innovative companies in the world, and the fastest growing enterprise software company. I didn't think it was a coincidence. Now, once it left my mouth, let me be really clear. I'm not the first to say it. Happy employee, happy customer, you get that right, you grow greater. I'm not the first to say it, but could I prove it? And that was the first research we did, was with Forbes Insight. It was US based only. We looked at publicly traded companies, and the stat that came out is what you just identified, that we looked across Glassdoor ratings and S&P growth rates and CAGRs over 3 years and NPS scores and eNPS scores and attrition rates and retention rates and all those things. And then we literally said, okay, what does it tell us? And sure enough, those companies that had both high C and high E had faster growth rates. Now, as you mentioned, if you don't have both, you're still growing. Right? It was 4 something, right? 427 or 487, something like that. So if you had low E or low C and high E, right? You were in a mixed category, but one of them was low, you were still growing. So this is not if you're not doing both, you're not growing. The statement here is if you do both and you do both well, you get a flywheel effect, the ripple effect of the goodness of both employee and customer experience. And that's where we saw those accelerated growth rates.
Well, this flywheel is an interesting concept, right? So beautifully explained, by the way. I will just go back to that design response. When you look at those images before we jump into the flywheel, is that how, it's what's dawning on me. It's a good way of actually trying to communicate when you're in a meeting instead of the PowerPoint, which is destroying everything. When you're communicating to a client, you might want to go team to the book and look at the way when Tiffani's summarizing what happened at Zappos or IBM or Starbucks, there's this picture that captures everything in a very nice way. you can almost imagine capturing your value proposition or the ROI or the impact on your solution to that business. There's the financials in the Excel, but the story to those visual learners, that are looking for a better future. I love the idea of actually having somebody on the team who can do that, and maybe do it on a whiteboard in real time would be spectacular.
Well, we've all seen it, right? Someone's speaking and someone's then capturing it in images on the side. And it's just a great way, storytelling is an art, capturing that, the way in which people, I can read an article about, let's just say a case study, but if I have a conversation with the executive and let's just say it's the exact same story and they add no more color, I will always remember the conversation much longer than I remember what I've read. And so, it's that listen, visual learning. And I think that's something that all of us, right? But salespeople in particular, right? Writing a long email or, responding to an RFP, right? That is a very flat medium. That is it's up for interpretation. It might be too verbose. It might be too short. It might be misinterpreted. But the conversation, if you can have a conversation, you can pick up on those cues. So a conversation, if you get the opportunity, is always better. But the images is also a way for it to be remembered, right? It's about retaining and remembering and being able to then share back what you've just heard, because that executive that you're pitching to or giving, a sales call to or whatever it might be, is going to eventually have to tell what you've told them to somebody else.
Exactly.
And if they then misrepresent it, or if they say, you know what, he gave me or she gave me this really great story of how a client did this and then that really resonated with me. I wanted to learn more. So she set up a call and then I spoke to that client. And now all of a sudden it's really memorable versus your competitor who just answered in an email. Now, we don't always get that opportunity. I get it. Like, we have to kind of follow our customers' leads. But if you get that opportunity, always jump on it, because some people prefer email communication and that's their mode of communication. You respect that. But if you find somebody where they're more engaging and engaged in a human conversation or a story or a customer in front of them, take advantage of it.
Oh, great advice. And Tiffani, maybe let's talk through a couple of the different chapters here. And we'll talk about the mindset, the model tapes that takes us through the people, process, technology, culture, all those kinds of good things. But maybe we start, because a lot of this is this combination, the flywheel of customer experience and employee experience. But you start in chapter 1 with the customer experience. And you talk about these characteristics, you summarize with these characteristics of a superior customer experience. It's efficient, it's personalized, it's predictive, proactive, flexible, responsive, and value-based. Let's talk about some of the key insights there from this, thinking about we don't ignore the customer experience. Obviously, it's critically important, and you reference people like Zappos and Best Buy and a few others. Tell us a little bit about the importance of the customer experience before we do that deeper dive on this this less discussed topic of the importance of employee experience along with it.
Sure. Listen, I was, as I mentioned, very, very early in the cloud.
Great timing, by the way.
Yeah, it was the World Wide Web, right, back then. And let's call it 1999 to 2004. Like I was really early. The very first domain name I ever sold to a company was 1997. I bought my first domain in 1998. Like I've been on this journey for a hot minute. But I would say that we have spent decades. I can remember in the early 2000s, I was Eloqua or Eloqua, depending on how you say it. I was their beta client. I was Constant Contact's beta client. And back then, what we were trying to solve was we were moving people from the yellow pages, radio, print ad, mailers to this thing digital on a computer. And people just sort of lifted and moved and shifted a brochure from offline to online.
Right.
And they're like, okay, I'm done. Right.
Yeah.
And then people realized, well, hold on a second, I can actually sell things online. And so when we first started doing commerce online, it was like 10 clicks to buy something.
Mm-hmm.
So we worked very hard to reduce the effort for the customer in order to increase their experience. Right. 10 clicks to 9 clicks to 8 clicks. You know, we eventually got to 3 clicks. That was kind of the golden rule. Fast forward, let's call it maybe 17 or 18 years. Then it was, 1 click, with a very large online retailer. And then it was, now you could almost no click. You could voice order from a device. And so it was always about reducing friction, personalization, predictive, all of the words and terms you just used that I identified in the book. And that was really the remit of marketing, right? It was about journey mapping and customer advisory boards and how do we anticipate what our customers may want next from us and how do we build. And so when they show up, we're waiting for them with whatever it is that they may need. They don't even know what they need, very Steve Jobs. Right. Or, you know what, we're watching what they need as analytics and data became more prevalent. Whatever it might be, we were analyzing and deconstructing and journey mapping everything about that customer to reduce effort, remove friction, make it seamless, all those words we use, in order to improve the experience. And if we improve the experience, we would all say, if you improve the experience, you will grow, right? Net promoter score goes up. Oh, we see, recency of purchase go up. Promoter score goes up. We see basket sizes go up. We see NPS score go up. We see lifetime value go up. Whatever your metrics are, we started to get smarter about that. About 2008, when I was at Gartner, we made the prediction that the chief marketing officer was going to spend more on technology than the chief information officer. Now, this was 2008.
Okay.
People thought we were a little nuts, but it wasn't about the technology. And by the way, it wasn't about search engine optimization or digital advertising. It was really tech. They were building their own tech stacks. They were hiring UI designers and application developers, and they were buying servers and storage and networking. They were investing in tech because they wanted to control and have a better experience for the customer.
Right.
So it wasn't about tech. It was about the experience layer because we believed experience was going to be that next battleground for brands to fight instead of price, which the race to zero is never a good strategy. So that gave me from 2008 to 2016, when I joined Salesforce, to really hone in on the power of CX and everything that was focused around that. Right. And we advocated for getting the CMO at the C-suite. We advocated for having the voice of the customer. We advocated for investing in technology, right, around things that are experience-based. And that was a very successful activity set. But that led us to, right, that led me to that comment, and that led me to the journey that I went on that then really required me to think, I think I have, quote unquote, an 11th path. And that was really the experience, right? The employee experience, which I know we'll talk about next, but customer experience is important. Have to focus on it. It's critical. Always keep the customer in mind, right? Customer centricity, customer focus, whatever terms you want to use. It is a good strategy, but, right, there is a however, there is an and that I really, dug into in the experience mindset.
So 2 thoughts there. You talked about, hey, one of these epiphanies came to you when you were on a stage. I think it was in Vancouver. You mentioned it in the book. So today I'm in Toronto. And one of the things about Canadians is they get a good taste of both because we have very large regulated industries that don't allow you folks to come in and compete. Telco, banking. Okay. There is one type of experience there. And there isn't a focus on CX with love, but they have a regulated industry. They're not worried. They're high five, they're not worried about market share. They've got the market share. They're worried about risk. So there's one sort of experience there. But then Canadians, of course, buy everything online in the US. And now we have those experiences as well. We buy lots of things. We vacation, we go through and understand these things. So you see this importance of that experience. And particularly in protected industries, regulated industries, they understand it isn't priority one. However, for those regulated industries, they actually do care about number 2, which is this employee experience, chapter 2. And you start this chapter off, with a quote from one of our pal from this show. So Roger Martin's been on the show once, if not twice, also a Canadian, by the way. Thank you. And he says your top employees aren't simply doing a job for you. They create outcomes that wouldn't be possible if they disappeared. And you sort of let that sink in just a little bit. And then we hear all of these great stories. And again, the great organizations that put huge value on the employees. And then you had the Enderman research revealed that 74% of institutional investors agreed that a company's ability to win the best talent is actually more important in gaining investors' trust than the ability of that company to attract new customers or increase valuation multiples. That's an interesting one. How many clients have you and I both worked with that care about nothing but increasing that valuation multiple? So this is where the meat of this, the experience mindset, we're now talking about the employee experience, and you've got your perspective on the Great Resignation. Let's talk about some of the great findings there.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the term, the Great Resignation. I call it in the book, the Great Reflection. I like that better. I think people didn't just like sit back and resign to what was happening or resign, I'm giving up. It was more of a reflection of, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I have no joy. I'm not getting paid enough. I don't like the place I work. I don't like the people I work with, or I don't like the commute. I want to start my own business. Whatever the reason, I feel like it's a more positive for the employee, maybe not great for the employer, but for all intent and purposes, people sort of taking a little bit more control when they could. But I just want to be clear here, and a kind of a caveat to all this is, I am not a people expert, nor am I a culture expert. This experience mindset is focused on the intersection at the moment that matters, when a customer and an employee interact. Now, that interaction might be in person, it might be digital, it might be with no person. And what I mean by that is, it might be the UI designed on the website or the app. That is an interaction between a brand and a customer that a human designed, right? So if the human didn't design it well, and it's still 10 clicks, or it's clunky, right? And you got to find your way through something, it's not intuitive, that has a negative impact on the customer experience. Right. Now, why did that employee design that UI poorly? Were they rushed? Were they not managed properly? Did they not know the expectations? Were they dissatisfied with work and really frustrated, and so it showed itself in the design? Is it they just weren't willing to do the work, go the extra mile? What was the reason? There's a reason it was not designed properly, or there's a reason the call center rep is short on the phone. Maybe they're just having a bad day, and let's put those aside. But are they short because this is the 75th time today they've had to answer this one question, and they've been telling their managers, like, hey, if we could just put FAQs up on the website, it would cut off 50% of these calls I get every day, because it's simple, basic questions, but there's no other way for our customers to get that information, right? That call center rep tells their manager does nothing. That call center rep is taking the calls day after day, monotony, right? There's no creativity, there's no value, there's no critical thinking. I'm bored out of my mind. I'm collecting a paycheck, i.e. quiet quitting.
Yes.
So what is the reason that something is happening? That's where the value, that's where you can uncover how you can improve the employee experience. So that moment that matters, while things like compensation, equity, and inclusion, very important, not covered in this book, right? It is really at the intersection of what are the things that keep employees engaged, satisfied, willing to do the work, feel like they're getting invested in, that their managers are supporting them. They have career development, there's psychological safety, sort of whatever terms you feel in that employee bubble, that so when they show up not only with their best selves, but doing their best work. And you've inspired them to do that because of the mindset you have around the importance of that employee. They're not just an asset, a line item that if they leave, you'll just replace, which I think over the last 3 years or so, we've realized that's not a great strategy either, because good talent is hard to recruit, and retain. So ultimately, you needed to make sure that you put the same level of effort and rigor behind what you do for employees that we have done for decades for customers. And that is this whole concept of when you make a decision for a customer, what is the intended or unintended consequence to an employee? As we reduced effort for customer and increased the experience, what ended up happening was the unintended consequence was the effort for the employee went up.
Right.
So let me pick sellers as an example.
Sure.
Would we ever, in a million years, ever ask our customers to jump through 5 tabs on their website or their mobile phone or their tablet to order something from us?
Mm-hmm.
1 tab to find the product, 1 tab to order, 1 tab to enter payment information, 1 tab to enter shipping information, 1 tab to track the order. Would we ever do that?
Of course not.
I think not, right? And if you did, you wouldn't be in
too
business
hard.
so long.
Yeah, we'll lose them. Of course, they'll just get fatigued of the journey. Away they go.
But unfortunately, how many salespeople have to jump between multiple applications to do their job?
Yeah.
Find the customer information. The CRM system might be different than the quote to cash system, which might be different from the lead management system, which might be different from, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. And it's not lost on me. Look, I work at Salesforce. I understand. I understand, but we could do it all in one app on one UI.
Right.
So it's not technology can't do it. It's that someone made a decision somewhere that they thought it was a better strategy to have multiple. And it's not about one provider or one vendor or, a customer 360 in our world where it's a single source of truth powered by us, but there is integration that you can do where that single pane of glass may be fed from multiple vendors' applications, but to the seller, it's one interface. And the amount of time that sellers spend selling is it's 28% of their time is spent selling. So we are absolutely overwhelming our people with things that are not what we're paying them to do, right? And it's administrative, it's tactical, it's repetitive, and it could be improved so significantly if sales leaders had the time and space to really reimagine those processes with the
time and space
seller in mind, not just the metrics.
What a beautiful example, by the way. And we won't go down this path too far because of course, now you get me on my soapbox. But if sales leaders had the time and space, which they don't, with a 18-month tenure before they get taken out of their job, and they're also highly confused with 6,000 different platforms in the sales tech stack. And they're always hoping for the next silver bullet that makes all of this easy. And the truth of it is, you got to be better at a live conversation to make this easy. So,
yes and no. I mean, I would say I agree with having a live conversation. Like, I don't want to negate that. But in Growth IQ, I had a chapter on sales optimization. And I coined a term called the seller's dilemma. And it was a play on Clayton Christensen's The Innovator's Dilemma.
Right.
And that was intentional. But the seller's dilemma is, as a leader, how do I manage the business day to day? Because if I don't, I won't have a job. Like, what are my numbers right now? Versus how do I transform? How do I optimize my business? How do I transform some of these things by eliminating, multiple applications? How do I do integration? And then how do I innovate at the same time? Because if I don't hit numbers, to your point, it's an 18-month tenure, I won't have my job. So I'm working on something that I will never get the fruits from that labor. So I'm just going to keep my head down and keep doing what I'm doing. And that's the space and time. And so this is where in experience mindset, I really challenge leaders. And I don't care if you're a team manager of 2 people, 5 people, you're a director, or you're a chief revenue or head of sales. I don't care how many people you have, right? But if you could ask one question, what one thing could I do to give you time back and reduce the effort in your job so that you could spend more time doing what I've hired you to do, i.e., let's just say selling, right? Now, if you ask that question as a leader, you have to be willing to listen and then action. So if all of a sudden you ask everybody in their one-on-ones one question, and then you take that back, and then your job is to, don't we always say, like, my job, I'm here for you to remove obstacles. And, that's what we say, then remove the obstacles, but pick one. Don't try to fix everything. And then the next week, ask them a process problem. Like, is there a process that you think is broken or kludgy or no longer necessary?
Yeah.
Maybe eliminate that process. And so one by one, it's one thing. The second thing I'd say is, and this is specific to CRM, would be, we have asked our sellers to enter information. This is part of this employee experience. You have to enter information. If it's not in Salesforce, it doesn't count. That kind of thing, that kind of approach.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's your one-on-one time. So you're sitting down with your seller, right? And I sit in front of you and I'm like, hey, Mark, tell me about this account. And in my head, I'm like, man, I stayed late last night and entered everything into Salesforce. And he just asked me the question, which means he didn't look. So why am I entering all this information? Versus taking the information and, as a manager, looking at it and spend your time coaching and mentoring and looking for ways to improve versus the administrative tactical. And if you don't think that's a true statement and you think you're doing it, there's a Bain study that shows that the majority of time is spent on administrative and not on coaching and mentoring. So that gives the employee experience, a negative hit, because now I'm like, they don't care enough to look at what I'm entering into the CRM system. So why am I spending time doing it? Right. And then it's this dissatisfaction. No one cares. I'm just grinding. I'm wasting my time. And we get into that the bad habit. So then when a seller is on the phone with a customer, it's not a great experience for anybody, right? I'm short. I'm like, yeah, whatever. It doesn't matter. Customer's like, wow, sales rep doesn't care. If they don't care, I don't care. Like, I'm going to go with someone else. Right. And just those small little things have huge impact. So the time and space is a behavior change for managers. Like, I was a high-performing seller.
And executives managing those leaders. And the other thing you talked about coaching, I actually firmly believe and agree. One of the main issues is the fact they don't coach. I don't think they know how to coach, because that's a different skill set. And a different joy. It's also a different joy. You and I were talking at the beginning, where you said, hey, one day you'd love to be back, being a professional salesperson. If that came to pass, that you'd love it. Leaders actually get their joy not from closing deals, but from seeing other people develop. That's why we run a sales training company. That's our buzz, which is seeing somebody actually get better. But it is different. It's different. Gretzky could never coach. He wanted to be that salesperson. The coach has got to be somebody who gets joy out of developing somebody else, rather than seeing everybody as a cog in the wheel to increase their productivity as a sales leader. You're just somebody retiring quota. But I will show a lot of love to salespeople. I've seen the Bain research, by the way. I'll show, to sales leaders. This is a tough job.
Yeah, of course.
It's in my view, it's the hardest job on the executive team today. And the scoreboard is public domain. Nobody else around the executive team has their performance evaluation on a public scoreboard that everybody in the company can see. But sales leaders do, which is what drives that quarterly cadence all the time, saying, hey, instead of coaching them on one-on-one, I better default to opportunity management and telling them what to do with the deal, because I better get that deal this quarter, because I won't be around next quarter if it doesn't happen. However, Tiffani, by the way, before we go down, this is a different LinkedIn Live webinar, but I do want to finish with the rest of a couple of other key items with your book, if that's okay. Back on this employee experience, rather than our chat about the sales leaders, I want to just go back to that employee experience, because you call out this migration of, I love all the terms in your book too, moving from B2B or B2C to going B4C and then B4E. And if we're saying the employee experience is so great, is so important, and you say, listen, you're not an expert on culture, but we speak about culture in the book, right? We talk about the people, process, culture, and technology. But you and I both love Seth Godin's stuff, but you interview Seth on your podcast. And I loved your discussion with Seth on his latest book, The Song of Significance. And right at the beginning of the book, he talks about asking 10,000 people, okay, describe the conditions of the best job they've ever had. And you could pick multiple things in that list. So it's not just the one, it's multiple. And the top four that came back with were, I surprised myself with what I could accomplish. I could work independently. Okay. The team built something important, kind of ties into what you speak about so eloquently in terms of vision later in the book. And then people treated me with respect. And I know you say you're not an expert on this, but I think there's this interesting tie around the employee experience where some folks in mid-sized companies we see work with that challenge around holding people accountable, but still making sure they have a great experience. What are your thoughts on the balance or that balancing act between those two things? Because two of the ones on Seth's book came back saying, hey, it's important that I actually accomplish something meaningful. So they actually appreciated being kind of coached to elevate performance.
Well, I'm going to go, and I totally understand why we don't want to get caught in the nits and gnats of that sales conversation, because it's about the experience mindset. But what I'm going to take it back to that to answer this question, because a high performing seller, i.e. Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah. Thank you, by the way. We appreciate the Canadian references.
Well, because you said it, right? Wasn't necessarily a great coach. Just because you're a high performing seller doesn't mean you're going to be a great leader or a great manager. Because like, I'm just going to take myself as an example. I was a high performer. I always hit quota. I got promoted. I got promoted. I got promoted. I got promoted. But along the way, no one invested me on coaching and mentoring me on how I can coach and mentor other people.
Right.
So I was almost set up to not be successful as a great manager. Okay, so now let's go back to I felt I could work independently. I felt I was part of a team. That requires a really great manager to create that environment. But are we investing in managers as they promote? You hit this Peter principle, which is the sort of, you reach the level of your incompetence, meaning like you just don't know how to do what you've been asked to do or promoted to do. And that is the culture of the business in investing in its talent to give it the tools and capabilities the individuals need to be successful in their role.
Yeah.
You don't just wake up and you're a manager, right? And so, and I don't know this story, like, you know, I'm just going to, because we picked Wayne, but did Wayne try to coach his teammates, right? That were playing for his team as a coach, the way he was coached, or he expected them to play like he played? Was he working with a coach to help him be a better coach and a better manager, and see how to get out of that player mentality into, I'm not a seller anymore, like I'm a manager? And it is about closing those deals. But you said something, you said, look, the joy we get is in lifting others up. That is a very different mentality than I'm out killing deals.
Absolutely it is.
I'm competitive. I want to win. You know, I'm running through fire for my customers and I'm going to hit quota and I'm going to go to club. Yes. That's very different than, no, I want to create people who are going to take my job, right? Because if I do a good job, they rise up. Okay. That is a very different mentality. So you either have to, so investing in people, career development, and know that I matter. And that if I get an opportunity, that is all part of the employee experience we went after, right? We dug into what are the attributes and elements of the employee experience that will have the greatest impact on a customer. So it was things like, do I feel like I have the tools, the appropriate tools,
right,
and systems? I'll give you a stat. We'll go back to tech for a second. 52% of the C-suite believe the technology that employees are using is effective to do their job. Okay, so that means 48% of the C-suite, this is a global study, don't believe that they have the right technology deployed. Like, oh my God, there's trillions of dollars spent, billions on customer experience, billions in the sales stack, MarTech space. And, you know, this is all up, not just MarTech, but 52% believe that it is effective. Only 32% of the general employee base agree with that statement. So there's already a 20% delta between what the C-suite thinks and what the general employee population thinks. But wait for it. Only 20% of customer-facing employees agree that the technology they've been provided allows them to be effective and collaborate with their teammates. So only 20% of customer facing. What do businesses do? They make stuff, they sell stuff. What do businesses want to do? Earn money and profitability. Yet those responsible, those customer facing employees, are the least satisfied with the technology that's getting provided. So, why is that? That has huge implications to employee satisfaction and engagement. We have incredibly high numbers of dissatisfaction. And when we double clicked underneath what some of the attributes were, it was seamless technology. It was siloed groups, breaking down those silos. It was lack of integration between tools, right? Hopping between multiple tools. It was lack of career development. Like, I want you to invest in me. I care. I want you to care. Like, I want to work here. I love this company. I love who I work for, but I don't want to do the same thing every day for, 5 years.
For years and years and years.
Yeah. I want opportunity. So, look, this is where leaders have to listen better. And as leaders, we have to be willing to have a beginner's mind as well and go develop ourselves so that we can show up and help mentor and coach and lift up and identify and train and skill the next generation, even if it's to take your job, because if they take your job, then you're moving on. And if you're a good manager, you're going to keep moving up. In sales, unfortunately, it tends to be revenue based that triggers that they should be promoted versus they're a great manager, mentor, coach, leader, right? And people rally and they're really engaged in their business with their customers. There's a lot more. But as classic hardcore sellers, it's a very different mindset to flip the switch of I'm competitive individual to hold on. I have to, we're competitive as a team.
Yeah. And by the way, there's also high performing salespeople that are spectacular teammates. And there's super high performing salespeople that are not good teammates, no different than athletics. So the Gretzky analogy, everybody here plays hockey. Of course, we all did. But you knew those superstars that were in the league, but I don't want them on my team. So there's a difference there. But can I backtrack? I'd like to double click on something so important that you've touched on, and this floored me in the book. This was another stat. And by the way, folks, one of the things I love so much about the experience mindset, it's not opinion, they're facts. Data matters in professional sales today. And everything we're talking about here, there's great research and background, but it's that employee engagement. So I may get the numbers wrong, Tiffani, those ones I don't have right in front of me here, but let's say ballpark. It looked to me, I think if I remember, it was there's about 33% of employees are engaged, 17% were actively disengaged, something of that nature. So almost 1 in 5 actively disengaged. So and the definition is scary. But did it lead to a cost to business? Was it annually $17 billion? Do I have that number right? And I don't want to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact number, but it was mind-boggling, right?
It's just flabbergasting.
Yeah, right. And you could even, there's another one that in the amount of time that we as humans spend mentally switching when we switch applications. So the enterprise has an average of a little more than 1,000 unique applications internally, and only 27% of them are integrated, which who bears the brunt of that lack of integration? If you remember my comment about we've never asked customers to go and click through 5 applications, yet we ask our employees to do it every day, all day. That if you go from, if you go from one tab in Google to another tab in Google, or you go from, Slack to Salesforce, let's say, and you're going between those 2 applications, even though your eyes see that you've switched applications, it takes a couple of milliseconds for your brain to catch up. Okay. And over the course of a week, if you just think in a given day, if you're listening to this, how many times you switch between applications in a given day, it's like 400 or 500 times you're switching between applications, just, to go to Google, to go to this, to go to that, to, start a Zoom, to, get on LinkedIn, whatever you're going to do, right? The switching. Okay. It's a little less than 4 hours a week.
4 hours
a week. In just that millisecond switching.
Oh my gosh.
So integration has implication. Right? Yeah. All of these things, which is why in the experience mindset, I broke it down to people, which is sort of organizational training, career development, all the things we've been talking about, right? The second is process. What is the process to do something like quote to cash? How many steps? There's a company in Toronto I was working with, a very large retailer there. And it was 20 minutes for a return for a call center agent, 20 minutes for a return. Wow. It's like, do you think they wake up every day and go, today, I'm so excited, I'm going to do 30 returns. Woo, can't wait. Right. So how do we reduce the steps and the broken processes? The next is tech, which we talked about, right? They don't think it's working effectively, the switching time and all the things we mentioned. And then the fourth was culture. And PPT is a very famous framework. It was the Leave It Diamond many decades ago in the 1960s. So I added C for culture, right? So it's PPTC. I broke it down because I think that's where any leader that's listening to this would be like, okay, do I have the right people? To your point, I can't have all high performers. I can't have all low performers, right? I mean, there was a great article that I read a few weeks back that it was a very high trade in the NBA, the US National Basketball Association, from the championship team, from the Denver team to another team. And he wasn't a star scorer. Mm-hmm. He was a great bench player, and he was a great collaborator. He was a great passer. He was a great teammate, highly valuable, right? Highly valuable. So not the top performer, but the one that made the team click. And so paid a lot of money for that person. Not a well-known name, but a critical part of their winning story. So people is, what does the team look like? Process. How do I improve that? That's an area you could ask that one question, right? Give yourself the time and space in process. In technology, it's hard for an individual contributor to fix the tech stack. We don't have much control over that. As a leader, a manager, it's also difficult for you. If you are a senior leader, then I'd get with your IT team and be like, we have got to simplify the stack. Let's do it together. Pull in sales ops, et cetera, or marketing ops or rev ops, whatever you have. And then the fourth one is culture, is just, how does your organization view its employees? Mm-hmm. Are they a cost center? Is it value, right? That is something that's set at the top and then is accountable all the way through the organization. And it's also the way that people will say, listen, it might not be great right now, but I trust it will get better. And so that is a way I have found. I can't digest all of it at one time. I'd be caught in that seller's dilemma, right? It's too much to navigate. Right. But if I can deconstruct it into categories, then I can focus on a few things over time. And a year from now, the people, the process, the tech, and the culture will look very different.
Well, that's great coaching and counsel for those first steps, right? In each of those categories, how do we move the needle most without feeling overwhelmed or getting paralyzed by the paradox of choice? Tiffani, I found that stat in my notes. This is going to knock both of us off our socks. All right. So the percentage of employees that have been engaged in companies has not changed, according to your research, since 2007. 32%.
Yeah, that was Gallup's research. Gallup's research. Yep.
Thank you. Since 2007, 32%. So it stays the same.
Fairly flat, yes.
What's climbing is the percent that are actively disengaged, 17%, and it costs the global economy $7.8 trillion annually.
7.8 trillion. I thought it was a T, not a B, but I couldn't remember. Yeah.
Wow. Just shocking.
And if you're listening to this, you're going to be like, oh, I can't show up to my manager or my leader and be like, oh, this is costing us $7.2 trillion. And I read this book. Like, it has to be something very tactical, right? And so that's where you can say, listen, you know what I did? Once again, to the audience of sellers, unfortunately, there's only one thing a salesperson can control. We may think we have more control. We just don't. We don't control our compensation plan, the products we sell, the prices, the tools we use. We just have very little control. What we can control is how we show up. That we can control. So if you could take it upon yourself to say, I'm just going to track over the course of the week where I'm spending my time. And then on your next one-on-one, go, hey, you know what? Listen, I'm trying to become more productive. I want to hit quota. I want to go to club. I want to be better. I identified these 3 things. Could you help me with these 3 things? Instead of waiting for your manager to come and show up and ask you, or waiting for your manager to fix it, like be proactive and say, here are 3 things I really could use some help on. And let's do it across people, process, tech, and maybe culture. But culture might be a little too far out of the realm on this one. But let's just say, let's even just focus on process and tech, and let's not talk about people. Unless people for you is, I want to be trained, or I want to go to a class, or I want to do something in order to improve my performance. Would the company invest in me doing that?
Right.
Whatever. Right. Okay. Now you show up. Now you've asked. Now let's hypothetically say your leader goes, thank you. Oh my gosh, this is so fantastic. Let's put together a quarter plan.
Yeah.
Let's do a career plan this quarter. Let's give you some time back plan this quarter. And every week when we meet, we're going to talk about the plan. And then the last 10 minutes, we'll talk about the deals we're working on. But the first 20 minutes, we're going to talk about your plan. What a beautiful thing, right? What a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So you could be proactive and take ownership of that. Now, let's say you do that to your manager and they have no interest in doing it, which that's going to happen to some of you. They have no interest in doing it. Now what? Now you may find yourself falling into the quiet quitting. That then you might fall into the, I'm going to leave. Then you might fall into the, oh, now what do I do? I listened to Tiffani, I took this advice, I did it, and boom, it didn't happen. Do you just give up? I mean, that's where salespeople are fantastic, right? Because we have grit, we're resilient, we will keep trying, we will find different ways. And so then you might say, okay, if you're not going to help me, maybe those aren't the words you use, but if they're not going to help me, would you mind if I went to sales ops and I worked with them? Or do you mind if I go and ask to be coached over here? Or, right. So if they're not willing to do it, can you find another answer? If it's just flat out no, that's where you have to make your own decision. If this is still right for me, that's that reflection. Some people, it's unfortunate with the economy and everything going on. They have to keep working. They don't have the luxury of leaving and quitting and looking for something else. But if you do, and you can, maybe that's a signal to you that you want more out of where you work and who you work for.
I think people always have to make a smart decision there. But I would go back to those questions you suggested. And if the manager comes back and says no, then there's this reasonable question about why. Is there, did I ask for something that, we can't get into the budget this term or this quarter? Are there good and logical reasons for what's taking place? Is it, hey, I'm just diminishing this idea, or it doesn't make sense now because we've already got these 3 technology projects underway and so on and so on and so forth. So I absolutely
Mark, you nailed it.
I absolutely encourage the proactivity of saying, hey, how can I help my leaders help me? And then certainly the coaching I would have given my younger self 15, 20 years ago is other people have other things on their plate as well.
Right.
So understanding, well, why is it you don't agree that this would be helpful, or is it given the other things on our plate or the SG&A cost or whatever we're doing right now, we have to be a bit cautious. Hey, the economy is a bit funny. We're letting people go. We have to be a bit careful about making major capital investments in things, at least for a quarter or two. Then you go, hey, I totally got it. Like, that seems reasonable to me and logical. So, making sure it's not an either, it's just an ongoing discourse. But I love the idea of the proactive approach.
Well, that requires managers to be better communicators on the why. And that's all we want, right? Like, I just don't want to flat out no. And you just walk away from me. And I'm like, okay, well, is this something I did? Are you not interested in me? Is it a budget? Is it too many projects? Is it, is you're having a bad day? Like, just tell me why. Now, we may not like the answer, but at least now we're not wondering what it is. And so this requires managers to really hone their communication skills. They're dealing with conflict. Like, Kim Scott, Radical Candor is a great book on how to give constructive criticism, constructive advice, really guide and coach in a way that may be uncomfortable to the person giving it and the person receiving it, but necessary. So I think that, and this goes into that employee experience. I give a suggestion, it goes in a black hole. Let's just call it employee surveys. If you're surveying your employees and they care enough to answer the survey, and we found in the research that the majority of companies capture employee data and don't know what to do with it. And because they don't know what to do with it, guess what? They do nothing with it. So then the next time the company surveys the employees, what's the employee going to do? Well, they didn't do anything the last time. So why am I going to answer this time? Right. Yeah. So those little things go a long way, and it plays a part. And by the way, that's a culture comment. We survey and do nothing with it is a culture problem. Yeah. Right. We survey, we understand and uncover where the problems are. And then we don't ever say what we're doing, or we don't ever give readouts of what we've done, what's working, what was adjusted. Or to your point, where we started this whole conversation, in highly regulated industries, you have very different sets of rules than industries that are not regulated. And so as an employee, you may not know the regulations. So you think what you're doing is stupid, but unfortunately it's necessary.
Right.
So, unfortunately. Right. But then if I go, oh, you know, it's because I work in telco or financial services, that's why it is the way that it is. And if you're just flat out frustrated, don't work in highly regulated industries, right? Go sell somewhere else. But, you know, I think that kind of, to your point, the feedback loop was one of the findings in the study that has an impact on that satisfaction and dissatisfaction of employees.
Yeah. Well, there's an amazing place to stop for today. I mean, first of all, Tiffani, we could keep talking about this for hours. I'm sure you're talking about this for hours every day with other podcasts and interviewers, but on behalf of our team and everybody with the Selling Well podcast, thank you so much for joining today. We exist with the podcast because we're really about trying to improve the performance and professionalism of B2B sales, and in doing so, improve the lives of professional salespeople. The experience mindset, talking about making sure organizations and leaders balance that flywheel between customer experience and employee experience, moves in that direction. So the leaders listening today are going to glean a lot. And I think the salespeople listening today are going to have hope that doing this is smart for business and drives better results. And we talked about the 1.8 times better CAGR over a 3-year period of time. We'll have all the links, Tiffani, but how do people learn more about you? And team, this is going to be learning more about Tiffani after you go and get The Experience Mindset, Changing the Way You Think About Growth by Tiffani Bova. How else do they follow what you're doing outside of the book and the What's New podcast? What's next podcast?
Sure. So, those two are great. And I, of course, appreciate anybody, deciding after listening to this to go pick up the book. That would be amazing. But you can follow me on LinkedIn. I've got no more connections. So you only can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active. I'm also active on Twitter, active on Instagram, starting to get more active on Threads. But I am also really interested in feedback, right? If you heard something today that really resonated with you, or more importantly, you did not agree with, drop me a direct message on LinkedIn. Those are great because you'll be like, look, I heard what you said. I tried it. It didn't work. This is what happened. Because I learn from you as I sort of speak and give examples. I get new examples from you, but I also course correct, right? Things are changing. I wrote this book over a year ago. And just because it just published, 6 weeks ago, doesn't mean things haven't changed. So, ultimately, I'm always trying to keep it fresh, and I get that from you. So any feedback, I'm always open.
That's fantastic. We actually always close the podcast with a similar comment, Tiffani. So folks, thank you for listening to today's podcast. We thank Tiffani Bova again. And folks, you know why we run this podcast, and we want to get better. So if there's things that we can be doing to improve the value you get from this kind of discussion, we'd love to know. And my personal email that I check is actually markcox@inthefunnel.com. No dots, markcox@inthefunnel.com. We're big, but we love constructive criticism, and we respond to every email and all the feedback we get. So first of all, thank you for sending your notes, and please keep them coming. And we'll see everybody next time on the Selling Well podcast. And Tiffani, thank you so much. We'll see you again soon.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Mark, for having me back. I appreciate the support.
You're welcome.
Take care.
Bye-bye.